Welcome to the Healing Migraines Naturally podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Leslie Caesar, and I am a licensed naturopathic doctor, former chronic migraine sufferer, and I have dedicated my life to helping other women with chronic migraines restore their health so their body no longer generates the migraines and they can get off unwanted medication and not take fistfuls of supplements. So welcome to the podcast. Today I'm going to talk about a question that comes up pretty frequently, so we're going to cover it today. And that is, how come I don't feel like eating meat anymore? And is that a problem? Does that resonate for you? Have you noticed that you have less and less of an appetite for eating meat, like beef, chicken, pork, fish, shellfish? Okay, are you more only feeling like eating maybe like dairy proteins like Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, hard cheeses like cheddar cheese, or, you want to put shredded cheese on a lot of things? That seems to be really appealing. Maybe you feel like eating eggs, that's a little bit more appealing. But now when it comes to eating like, a piece of steak or a roast cut, definitely like chicken breast, right? Seems really dry and unappetizing. Have you noticed that as the years have gone by, you have less and less of an appetite or a desire to eat meat or like animal foods, or, maybe they just seem really dry, like, chicken, it just seems so dry to me. The texture just doesn't appeal to me anymore. I have to have a lot of sauce or gravy on it in order for it to be appealing. Have you noticed that if it's ground beef or ground turkey, that's much more appealing to you and you can eat a little bit more of that, versus like if it's that whole cut, like a steak cut or roast cut, piece of chicken, it's not that appealing to you and you're like, not so much. Have you noticed that the quantity that you can eat has really decreased over time? So, you used to be able to eat like a full, hamburger from the grill, and now it's like, half is really all I can eat. This phenomenon, unfortunately, is many times blamed on quote unquote normal aging, right? So kind of like the stereotype of like an elderly person is that they're eating very little and they're not eating a lot of meat or animal foods. And that's attributed falsely to quote unquote normal aging. Does this resonate for you? It's a pretty common phenomenon. So we're going to talk about what this means, because this is actually a symptom. And so a lot of people don't realize that this is actually a symptom. They think that it's maybe just sort of something inherent to them. This is just kind of how I'm wired. I'm just not a meat eater. Or they think that it's unhealthy to eat animal foods, to eat meat. So let's dive into this. Okay, so I'm calling this what it is, which is a symptom. And so this might be a surprise to people that this is actually a symptom. So we humans, we're omnivores, okay? We eat a wide variety of foods, unlike most other animals who have to eat within a very, specific frame. Like I have 2 cats. Cats are carnivores. They're, dogs are much more omnivores than cats. Dogs, they can eat bread and, they kind of forage, they left to their own in the wild, they'll forage things out of trash cans and things like that. They can eat a wider variety of food. But cats are pure carnivores, right? They really only eat animals in the wild. And so most animals have a very, very, constrained diet that they can eat, whereas we humans, we can live from the Arctic to the equator and we can eat a very wide variety of foods and flourish. But part of the human diet is animal foods. So there's no naturally occurring culture anywhere on Earth where they're not eating some animal foods. So that is to say, a vegan diet where you're not consuming any animal-based foods. There's no naturally occurring vegan diet ever documented by anthropologists. Okay, now there are cultures that eat what we call a vegetarian diet, But even those vegetarian diets are incorporating animal foods or animal proteins. So, hi there. I want to jump in real quick and tell you about my client Beth. She was getting 15 to 20 migraines and headaches per month. And as you can imagine, this was impacting her work performance and her confidence. She also has 2 small children, and she was starting to feel like she was a horrible mom because she had nothing left for them at the end of the day. But she reached out and she booked a free consult call with me, and after I asked her about her migraines and her health history, I felt confident that I could help her. I help women uncover the root drivers of their migraines and follow a step-by-step plan to dramatically reduce the frequency by up to 90% without adding more medication or taking a bunch of supplements. So we built her personal migraine map, followed the plan, and now she will get 1 to 2 migraines per year, which she uses ibuprofen to treat if she needs to, versus up to 15 to 20 per month when we first started working together that weren't responding well to any medication. She just reached out to tell me that she got a promotion at work, she's on top of her career again, and has been able to come off all of her migraine medication. But most importantly, she's a confident mom again, and she's attending birthday parties at Jump Zone with her kids and saying yes instead of saying maybe later. I've worked with women like Beth from all over the United States who were told, this is the best we can do, but they were still willing to dig deeper. So if you're serious about changing your migraine story, go to drlesliecaesar.com/apply or tap the link in the show notes, and on our free consult, we'll map out why your migraines keep coming back and the first 3 steps you can take over the next 30 days. I do cap new client spots each month, so if the calendar is full, the doors are closed for now. But if you're done feeling helpless and ready to do the work to heal, pause this episode for 30 seconds and book that consult call now. Sort of a very famous, predominantly vegetarian culture is the Indian culture, the Hindu culture. Within that culture, and beef is definitely prohibited, and many sects within Hinduism will not eat chicken or fish or other animal foods, but they will consume dairy proteins, and most will consume proteins from eggs. Okay, so there is some animal protein component even within a vegetarian diet. So that has been documented, but there's no naturally occurring vegan diet ever documented. Now, even people who traditionally eat in a vegetarian way, they do better if they consume more animal protein. Okay, so again, we sort of, like in modern American culture, we kind of have this like idealized notion that everybody that lived prior to the modern era was thriving and, everything was just sort of a paradise. And that's not true. There was plenty of disease and illness and sickness, even when people were not living in this modern way that we're currently living, right? So, just to say that something, a way of eating is naturally occurring or, was in play, 5,000 years ago or something, doesn't necessarily mean that they were all in perfect health and that, everybody was thriving. There could still be plenty of nutrient deficiencies or nutritional deficiencies within that, sort of native diet. I think in modern America, we are very blessed in that we have access to food that can be transported to us from all over the world. And so we have access to a tremendous variety of food, really unprecedented in the human experience. And, we really should be thriving much more than we are, okay, because we do have access to so much wonderful food, okay? So this is giving you a little bit of a clue that, like particularly within the migraine community, what's touted is like special migraine diets and so on. So it's not about excluding foods, right? We should be able to take advantage of our ability in our society to eat a wonderful wide variety of food. So I just want to put that out there. Just because, they ate a certain way in the Paleolithic age doesn't necessarily mean that they were thriving in the Paleolithic age, or that we should eat that way now. But in any case, what I want to say here, the overall point is that humans do very well. They should be eating animal foods, okay, as part of their diet. Animal foods are concentrated protein foods, okay? So there are proteins in plant foods that we eat, okay? But animal foods are concentrated protein sources, okay? Plants have also carbohydrates. Some plants, there's going to be some fat in plants too, but protein is very, very concentrated protein source. And again, we humans, I am convinced that we are going to flourish if we incorporate some protein from animal sources into our diet. When we eat the food that we eat, our digestive tract has to be able to break the food down and get those nutrients out of the food. And so if there's protein within the food that we're eating, the digestive tract has to break that protein down into amino acids. Okay, and so the amino acids are like the building block of the protein, and we break that protein down into its like little amino acid parts, and then we use those amino acids to do our cellular work and build our body up and make hormones and signaling molecules and the whole bit, neurotransmitters, etc. Right? So we have a tremendous need for amino acids from the protein that we've eaten. So when we eat foods that contain protein, particularly animal foods, which are very protein dense foods, it's harder for our digestive tract to break the protein down than it is for our digestive tract to break down carbohydrates. Okay, so it's more work for our digestive tract to break protein dense foods down. And so when our digestive function starts to decline, our appetite changes. I've talked about this in my response video to the recent changes in the FDA food pyramid. So check that podcast out too. We'll link to it in the show notes. But when our digestive function starts to decline, our appetite changes. And this is something that people don't realize, and they actually very rarely recognize when it's happening to them. I just had this discussion with a client this week because when we started working together, she had very, very low appetite, very, very poor digestive function, and she didn't feel like eating much at all, and her family was very concerned about her, and they kept telling her, Mom, you eat like a bird, don't you think you should eat more? Her husband was always telling her, won't you sit and eat with me? Come on, honey, I think you need to eat more. She said, no, I ate enough, I'm full after I ate. So she had no idea that this phenomenon was happening to her, because it is very difficult for us to kind of realize it. So what happens is when our digestive function starts to decline, our body wants to protect us. Okay? If we start putting food into our digestive tract and we can't break the food down, we're going to have worse problems. Okay? So our body says, okay, how can I protect her from getting into worse trouble? Well, I'm going to change what she feels like eating. And I'm going to direct her to eat foods that I can actually break down, that are easy for me to digest. I'm going to make her want to eat those foods. And I'm going to make the foods that are harder for me to digest, I'm going to make her kind of feel like, ugh, I don't want to eat that. So literally, our appetite will change to accommodate our digestive function. Okay, and this is one of the most critical things to understand, and most natural practitioners, unfortunately most of my naturopathic colleagues, don't understand this connection either. But this is a critical thing to realize. Our body is always trying to function and flourish at its best. Okay, I know I know when you have migraines, it feels like your body hates you and it's trying to torture you. But our body is always trying to flourish in the conditions in which it finds itself. Okay, so if the digestive function starts to decline, our body says, okay, well, it's not optimal, but how can I make the best of this situation? Well, I'm going to drive her to eat things that I can actually break down. This drives a lot of what we call food cravings. Our digestive function is actually a tremendous driver of what we call food cravings. So when people start to crave things, oh boy, pretzels, I just want something crunchy and salty, chips, right? Sweets, candy, right? These are the typical things that we crave, right? And that we're fighting ourselves over. We think when we have these types of cravings, we think, oh, do I have some sort of mental and emotional, emotional eating thing going on here? Is it hormonal, right? What's going on here? By and large, these types of food cravings are actually being driven by our digestive function. So the foods that we typically crave are usually very easily digestible foods, okay? Like grains are the most easily digestible foods. So things made out of grains, things made out of wheat flour or corn flour or rice flour. So you've got your pretzels, you've got your, corn chips, popcorn, right? Corn is actually a grain. It's not a vegetable, but it's a grain. So think, pasta, people, right, made out of wheat traditionally. Now it might be made out of, wheat alternative flour. So all of these things that people kind of crave, or like white potatoes are very easy to break down. So now you've got your potato chip category, right? So all of these things that people typically crave are actually very easily digestible foods, okay? And protein, animal foods, it's harder to break down. It takes a lot more energy, a lot more effort. You need more hydrochloric acid. You need more digestive enzymes to break protein down into amino acids. So if your digestion can't do that, your appetite is going to make those types of foods kind of repulsive to you, right? All of a sudden the chicken tastes real dry, right? Well, I don't want to chew this. It's too dry, right? It's too tough. So you're just going to eat a little bit of it, right? Instead of 4 ounces, you're just going to eat 1.5 ounces because it just seems so dry to you, so tough. I got to chew this so much. It's unappealing. Before you know it, you've only eaten a couple bites and it's like, yeah, I'm done. I'm done with this, right? We're going to feel full faster. So we're going to take a couple bites of a hamburger. We used to be able to eat a whole hamburger. Now we take a couple bites. Now I'm too full to finish the hamburger, right? Because that beef, it's harder to break down than the bun, right? This is why, people want that big fluffy bun and they just want a little meat on the bun, right? Because that's going to be a lot easier to break down. The bun is going to be made out of grains. The bun is going to be a lot easier to digest. People think, well, I'm just this kind of person, this is how I've always been. This is, my appetite. What can I do? This is what I like. This is what I prefer, right? We think that it's like something inherent to us, and by and large, it's not. It's a reflection of our digestive function and our body steering us, it's steering us to success. It's trying to set us up for success and not failure. Okay, so that solves the problem in the moment, right? For that meal, it solves the problem. For this meal, I'm eating what I can easily digest, okay? But what about the next meal? What about the next week, next year? What about a decade goes by and you haven't been able to eat a wide variety of food? You haven't been able to eat animal foods and you haven't been able to get in adequate protein, okay? This is critical. Adequate protein is critical, particularly in our modern environment. So what I have been convinced of is in our modern environment here, where we are in a tremendously more stressful environment than humans, a lot of humans around the world are in today, but just a few hundred years ago, everyone was in a much less stressful environment than what we are in America today. So we have a tremendous increase in physical stressors that we're exposed to. And because of that, I have become convinced that we need even more protein as a result to flourish in this environment that we're in now. Okay, so this again, it kind of ties into sort of this like line of thinking that we have that, if it's natural or if it's native, it must be better than what we have now because we're living in this kind of like fake modern environment. So if we go back to something natural or native, it must be better for us, and this is, a whole diet was created around this called the paleo diet. And so the rationale behind this diet was to eat in the way that humans ate before agriculture, because agriculture is a relatively recent development in human history, and so most humans were living prior to agriculture, and so we should eat in the way that people ate prior to agriculture, right? Somehow it would be better for us to not eat these quote-unquote new foods that were introduced about 10,000 years ago with agriculture, right? So that was the rationale. But the environment that humans were living in the Paleolithic age is completely different. I mean, it's unrecognizable. I mean, you take a Paleolithic human and drop them down into the Chicago suburbs where I live, and I mean, they wouldn't last a minute. I mean, first of all, their mind would be blown, right? So we're not living in that type of environment, and we humans were highly adaptable. We can live in a tremendous variety of environments. But there's particular, within different environments, we have to have different pieces in place to flourish within those environments. And so I've become convinced that in our modern American environment, we have a need for a lot more protein than a human would have needed 1,000 years ago. An environment where you're living, in a small group of 150 people or something like that. So the physical stressors that we're under, I mean, we're bombarded constantly by, relatively novel physical stressors. One that we don't think about at all is the physical stress of car travel. Hi there. I want to jump in real quick and tell you about my client, Beth. She was getting 15 to 20 migraines and headaches per month. And as you can imagine, this was impacting her work performance and her confidence. She also has 2 small children, and she was starting to feel like she was a horrible mom because she had nothing left for them at the end of the day. But she reached out and she booked a free consult call with me, and after I asked her about her migraines and her health history, I felt confident that I could help her. I help women uncover the root drivers of their migraines and follow a step-by-step plan to dramatically reduce the frequency by up to 90% without adding more medication or taking a bunch of supplements. So we built her personal migraine map, followed the plan, and now she will get 1 to 2 migraines per year, which she uses ibuprofen to treat if she needs to, versus up to 15 to 20 per month when we first started working together that weren't responding well to any medication. She just reached out to tell me that she got a promotion at work, she's on top of her career again, and has been able to come off all of her migraine medication. But most importantly, she's a confident mom again, and she's attending birthday parties at Jump Zone with her kids and saying yes instead of saying maybe later. I've worked with women like Beth from all over the United States who were told, this is the best we can do, but they were still willing to dig deeper. So if you're serious about changing your migraine story, go to drlesliecaesar.com/apply or tap the link in the show notes, and on our free consult, we'll map out why your migraines keep coming back and the first 3 steps you can take over the next 30 days. I do cap new client spots each month, so if the calendar is full, the doors are closed for now. But if you're done feeling helpless and ready to do the work to heal, pause this episode for 30 seconds and book that consult call now. To get to my office today, I drove my car 4 miles from my home to my office. The highest speed limit that I encountered on the local roads was 45 miles an hour, which doesn't seem to be that much. But what humans traveled at 45 miles an hour, right? I mean, this is a very, very recent development, and traveling at that rate of speed generates more physical stress on your body than just, walking at 3 miles an hour. Okay, so just the exposure to that type of stress, G-force stress. Again, when we drive our car, we're not really, right? You get in your car, you drive to your office that you go to 5 days a week. You don't even think about it, but our brain is processing quite a bit, even on that routine drive. So, I mean, this is just like kind of an off-the-cuff example of just a day-to-day activity that we all take for granted that's applying a lot of physical stress on our body, which is pretty novel. And then you look at electromagnetic fields, Wi-Fi, 5G, all of the light that we're exposed to, right? As I'm recording this, I've got artificial light coming on me, right? So all of these things are physical stressors from the environment that are kind of bombarding our body, and we have to have the ability to withstand all of these stressors. We also have a lot of mental and emotional stress in the modern life that we lead that is also novel. So, not to say that, there weren't mental and emotional stressors in less complicated societies. Of course, there were. But all of this is to say, we live in a very stressful environment. I don't mean that necessarily mentally and emotionally, but all of these additional physical stressors that we're exposed to as well. And I really, really have become convinced that to thrive in this stressful environment, we need to consume more protein than people could have gotten by with a few hundred years ago. And the wonderful thing is we have access to the protein. So I also find that as the needs change for us humans, technology, right, meets the challenge. And so we do have the technology that we need to provide us with additional animal foods, which is fantastic. However, a lot of Americans are not taking advantage of this, either because they have very low appetite due to poor digestive function, which is rampant among Americans, or they've been told not to eat animal foods, okay? And so this, I think, is also something that has been very detrimental to people. I talked about this again. I touched on this in my response video to the new food pyramid guidelines, which at minimum doubled the daily protein recommendation for Americans, which I applauded because the previous protein recommendations were way, way too low. It was sort of like the minimal amount of protein you should consume to avoid severe malnourishment. Well, that's not, that's like subsistence level. That's enough to kind of keep us alive, but it's not going to be enough to keep us thriving. And so the new food pyramid guidelines, I think, are well needed and a significant increase in the protein recommendation. However, like I talked about in that response video, a lot of Americans aren't going to be able to eat that much protein as recommended because they can't break it down. Their digestion is so poor. But the other factor is that Americans have been told not to eat animal foods. They've been told that it's, unhealthy, that it's, going to clog your arteries or it's going to drive inflammation or all of these things. So they've been told that animal food is actually a detrimental food to their health, and that's not the case at all. And so a lot of people have been sort of pushed into like a extreme vegetarian or even a vegan diet, and then most people, if they're going to eat a vegan diet, they're going to implement that by eating a lot of processed vegan fake foods or what I call factory foods. Okay, so that doesn't serve you, that serves the food companies. So I think, unfortunately, I don't have proof of this, but I suspect that a lot of this push to have people not eat, just sort of simple animal foods is actually a way for the food industry to sell their manufactured, factory-made meat alternative products to people under the guise that it's healthier for them or it's more ethical. So, certainly we want our food supply to be produced in an ethical way. And when it comes to animals, right, there's definitely some ethical concerns with how animals are raised and how they're cared for and how they're slaughtered. So certainly those things need to be addressed. And if we have it in budget, we do have a lot of options for purchasing animals, maybe direct from a farmer, etc. If that's in budget for people, for a lot of people, that's not going to be in budget. And we do have to eat according, within our budget. And so I feel that people should be prioritizing their own health first and living within their budget, but prioritizing their own health before they prioritize the health of the animal that they're eating. That's my take. I do put humans in our health and flourishing above animals. But for people that do have it within budget, there are many, many great ways. There are many great options for people to get animal foods that have been raised and slaughtered in a humane way. So I think that takes that ethical concern off the table that a lot of good people are very concerned about. I think that's a valid concern. But I think that our concern for animal welfare, again, I don't have proof of this, but I suspect that people's, good concern for animal welfare has been sort of exploited or weaponized by the food industry to kind of push people into their factory-made, products for meat alternative products that really they're not going to be as health supporting for you as eating actual animal food, even if it's not, organic animal food. Getting, real food in is preferential over getting factory food or what is, factory-made food or what is commonly called processed food. That's going to support your health more. Sometimes we are going to have to eat factory-made food or processed food. I eat some factory-made food. Okay, this is not like an edict that you can't eat any processed food or factory-made food. But in general, the more non-processed, non-factory-made food that you eat, it's going to be more health supporting. So, eating a conventional beef hamburger is going to be more health supporting than eating a factory-made beef alternative hamburger. And so this has also misled people into eating these other, to thinking that they're doing their health a favor by eating these factory-made meat alternative foods. So with my clients, most of my clients are under eating animal foods because they have poor digestive function and their appetite has been affected. I will have clients that are concerned about the ethical treatment of animals, and when that is an overriding concern, I work with them to find, good sources that they're comfortable with of animal foods. But really, what we should be focusing on is restoring digestive function. Just as I was talking about my client earlier, she said to me this week, I can't believe how little I used to eat, and I can't believe that I didn't realize it. Over and over again, I hear this from my clients. We don't realize when we have low appetite. We just think this must be all the food that I need to eat because I'm feeling full, and I'm like, yeah, I know. Nobody realizes it. Nobody, when it's happening to us, we're just not aware of it. We don't realize it. To solve the problem, it's not, you can't force yourself to eat. This is the thing. So if you're having poor digestive function and low appetite, if you force yourself to try to eat more food, you're going to get sick. And if you're prone to migraines, you're probably going to get a migraine to boot. We have to first gently restore digestive function, get the digestive tract up and running again, and then people's appetite will naturally change as a result. And they'll start to feel like eating more and more harder to digest food, like animal food. So again, we never want to force the body. We never want to try to push the body too hard because then we're going to have other downstream effects. And if you're prone to migraines, it's a great way to get a migraine if you're trying to force your body to do something. So restoring our health is really about gently restoring the function of the body, gently giving the body what it needs so that it can function optimally, and then the body responds. Our body wants to get back into a state of health, and so when we give the body what it needs to do that, it will respond and things will start to shift and change, and your appetite will start to shift and change too. It's amazing to see it happen. So I hope you enjoyed this today, and I hope this gave you a little bit of insight if you've been struggling to eat animal foods and you haven't been feeling like eating meat. I'll talk to you soon.